to get through those 2 games and then to go with a permanent appointment. Give yourself the time to do your due diligence, to scope who's there, to scope who wants to do it behind closed doors, and let's see where we go with it.
OK, just in a sentence, you'd like to see an interim manager?
Manage them, try supporting them.
OK. And Stephen, you know I know all about football formations, don't you? So I would be... Thank you all very much indeed for joining us this evening. Thank you. Now, the debate around transgender people's rights has become highly emotive in recent months, with growing arguments over how to define someone's gender in law. Some of the women who've been raising concerns about proposed changes to the Gender Recognition Act say they're being harassed and unfairly accused of being transphobic. It's an issue that's created a row within the SNP. Internal tensions were displayed this week with the leak of private messages between MSPs. Ruth Maguire responded to praise of Nicola Sturgeon's speech by posting FFS. Ash Denham and Gillian Martin then appeared to suggest they thought the First Minister was out of step with her party group. Well, today in a blog on the Scottish Government website, the Equalities Minister, Shirley-Anne Somerville, called for the increasingly polarised debate to become more respectful, stating, just as the First Minister has herself said in the past, I personally don't feel conflict between my support for trans rights and my support for women's rights. Well, we invited a number of SNP politicians, including Shirley-Anne Somerville, to appear on tonight's programme, but none of them was available. But we discussed the divisions with the national columnist Shona Craven and the political commentator Angela Haggerty. So a lot of the division centres around calls to amend the 2004 Gender Recognition Act. Currently, you have to have a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria in order to legally change your gender. But trans rights campaigners want to streamline the process to allow individuals to self-identify without a medical paperwork. Just to kind of give the background. I mean, Shona, what's your assessment of the divisions within the SNP on this?
I think it's really difficult to assess the position within the SNP based on, certainly the leak this week of messages comprising no more than 40 words, which I don't think we should read too much into what anyone's position is based on those messages. There may be a suggestion that there's a communication breakdown, and it's hoped that, the statement from Shirley-Anne Somerville today suggests that she is going to endeavour to make sure that all these views are heard.
But there does seem to be concern that the MSPs aren't being listened to.
Well, the information that I have is that this online communication was leaked by an SNP staffer, but it's not the only communication that exists. There may be some more to come. And as a result of it, I understand also that more staffers and indeed some SNP MPs and MSPs have also gone forward within the party to raise concerns about an anti-trans culture that they are very worried about. So I think that there is a problem within the SNP here. And, we've seen a party that has been hailed for the progress that it's made on LGBT rights. So we're talking about things like same-sex marriage and incorporating the Time for Inclusive Education campaign recommendations into the education curriculum. So now what we're seeing is a sort of an internal rebellion against that progress, and I think that's going to be a problem for the SNP.
And Joan McAlpine's come under pressure, hasn't she, Shona?
She has, and I think it's important to note that it's easy to oversimplify what this is about, and the Gender Recognition Act is a piece of legislation, people can kind of understand that. But this is a broader social issue, and it touches on lots of aspects of public policy and public life, including the census. And this is why Joan McAlpine's found herself kind of at the heart of this, because she's convening a committee that's asking what, to some people, would seem quite kind of technical, boring questions about how we answer questions on a census. It doesn't sound like the stuff of explosive arguments, but because she is convening that committee and has taken evidence and had these discussions, she's attracted a lot of personal fire for that.
So how do you see this playing out, Angela?
Well, I think that there is going to be an internal battle, as it were, within the SNP. I mean, Joan McAlpine, I would say, at least to Joan McAlpine's credit, she has said these, she has made her views known publicly, whereas what we're seeing with these online leaks is that some of these discussions are happening privately and people aren't aware of them. And it's important to say, one of the MSPs involved in that is Gillian Martin, who has already had to apologise for using transphobic language. She apologised on the record for referring to trans women as hairy-knuckled, lipstick-wearing transitional ladies. So I think that what that shows is that there's something deeper going on here than just conversations about gender recognition.
Can you see them reaching consensus?
I think, again, there's a lot of different issues that are already being looked at. The prisons policy is already being reviewed. Health and education are being looked at. This isn't a case of one side battling another and only one can triumph. It's a lot more nuanced than that. And I think it would be a real shame if this was conducted via the media, particularly if it looked to be men leaking things about women politicians having a spat. I think it'd be much better if everyone started having an open dialogue about it.
So there are concerns that trans women would be allowed into traditionally women-only spaces, for example, changing room toilets, and that's what a lot of the concerns are about, Angela.
Yeah, but I mean, I've said this before, is that I do feel there's a great element of scaremongering going on here. We have had women's organisations like Rape Crisis, for example, who have come forward and said that this is not an issue for them and that this is something that can be handled. What I worry about is that you're seeing the rights of two marginalised groups, women's rights and trans rights, being pitted against each other as if it's like a competition for rights. It doesn't need to be that way. There's no reason that trans women can't access all of these services and have the rights that they need to have.
But it does seem to be that when people do kind of raise concerns, sometimes they're kind of accused of being transphobic, even if they're saying the most innocuous things. I mean, is that not part of the problem with this whole issue?
The same goes on the other. I mean, I signed a letter in support of trans rights. I received a backlash for that from people on the other side. I've spoken to a number of people just this week who are in favour of trans rights, and they're receiving the same kind of backlash. So what you tend to find with social media is that this happens on any topic. You have two sides warring against each other, but I don't think that's reflective of real life.
Do you think that's the case, Shona?
I think there's a real false equivalence with this sort of false on two sides narrative. I think clearly there are people with strong views, there are people with views that are expressed in a very ill-tempered language, but I think when it comes to threats of rape and violence, to punch women, to punch feminist women, I see those violent threats and sexually violent threats coming from males under the cloak of a trans umbrella, which I think really does a disservice to the vast majority of trans people who would never dream of associating themselves with language and threats like that.
But I mean, that's just such a minority of instances and doesn't represent trans people. And when it's the only thing that people talk about and fixate on and kind of ignore the fact that actually, yes, it does happen on the other side, I think it misrepresents what's going on. And as I say, it pits two marginalised groups against each other in a very unhealthy way.
I would say the rape and violence threats don't come from the other side. And I think it's very problematic to talk about women fixating on threats against their personal safety. I think it's quite understandable why women would fixate on that.
I mean more of the trans debate fixating on that when there are so many other things that need to be talked about.
Yeah, there are so many other things.
I'll let you finish your point.
Yeah, there are a lot of other things that need to be talked about. We need to talk about child protection, we need to talk about schools guidance, prisons, sports. Unfortunately, it's just such a huge topic that it's very difficult to get these issues aired.
And we will have to leave it there, but Angela and Shona, thank you both very much indeed for joining us. Now, a new exhibition which celebrates